The first time she felt it, it was not fear or hope, but a quiet tightening in her chest, the kind that comes when something deep inside whispers that the world is about to tilt. The hallway of the glass tower smelled of lemon cleaner and cold money, and the city below glittered like it did not care who lived or broke beneath it. She paused with her mop midair, staring at the reflection of a man slumped behind a wall of glass, his head bowed as if the weight of the entire skyline pressed on his spine. In that moment, with aching hands and a tired back, she thought only one thing, simple and stubborn, like a prayer that refused to leave her. This is wrong. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet power of ordinary people doing the right thing, take a second right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel, because stories like this live and die by people who still believe goodness matters. Her name was Amina, though no one in the tower ever asked for it. She was a cleaning lady, hired through a contractor that paid late and paid little, and she worked nights because nights were cheaper and easier to ignore. The building belonged to the kind of people whose names were printed in business magazines, whose lives were measured in stocks, mergers, and quiet dinners far above the noise of the streets. Amina lived in a one-room apartment with peeling paint, shared with a silence that grew heavier each year since her husband passed away from a sickness that came too fast and left too slowly. Every evening she folded her grief into her uniform, tied her scarf tight, and reminded herself that survival was an act of discipline. She cleaned offices that were bigger than her entire home, wiped fingerprints off desks that held more money than she would earn in 10 lifetimes, and she did it with a dignity no one saw. That night was different. The tower was unusually tense, humming with a low anxiety that seeped through the walls. Screens glowed with numbers that fell and rose like heartbeats, and the air itself felt strained, as if holding its breath. Amina moved quietly, careful not to interrupt the invisible world of power around her. When she reached the executive floor, she noticed the man again. He was not old, but his face carried the exhaustion of someone who had been awake too long in a life that never slept. His suit was perfectly cut, his hair carefully styled, but something in his posture felt broken, like a structure built too fast without checking its foundation. He sat alone, staring at documents spread across the table, his hands pressed to his temples as if trying to keep his thoughts from spilling out. Amina did not know his name. She did not know he was a millionaire whose decisions could shake markets, that the company he built was on the edge of a collapse that would erase $500 million by morning if a single approval went through. All she knew was the look on his face, a look she recognized too well, the look of someone about to make a choice that could not be undone. As she wiped the glass walls, she noticed the papers he kept rereading, the way his finger traced the same line again and again, the tension in his jaw. She felt that tightening in her chest grow stronger, and her steps slowed. Her life had taught her to be invisible, to never interfere, to finish her job and go home. But grief had also taught her that silence could be its own kind of cruelty. She thought of the day her husband signed papers he did not understand, trusting people who spoke quickly and smiled easily, and how that trust cost them everything they had saved. She thought of how wrong it felt then, and how she wished someone, anyone, had spoken up. Standing there, holding a cloth damp with cleaner, she felt the same wrongness pressing against her ribs. Amina did something she had never done before. She stopped. She stood where she could be seen, not hiding behind the comfort of invisibility. Her heart pounded so hard she felt it in her ears. She gestured toward the papers on the table, careful, respectful, aware of the distance between their worlds. She did not accuse or demand. She simply pointed to a page, to a clause that had caught her eye because it looked like the fine print her husband once trusted away his future to. Her expression carried only concern, the kind born of hard lessons, and her mouth formed words she did not realize would change both their lives. This is wrong. The man looked up, startled, as if waking from a nightmare. For a moment, irritation flashed across his face, the reflex of someone unaccustomed to interruption. Then he followed her gaze, back to the papers, to the line she indicated. He read it again, slower this time. The tension in the room shifted. He leaned back, ran a hand through his hair, and stared at the ceiling, as if recalculating his entire existence. Amina stepped back, her courage spent, ready to disappear again into the shadows. She expected to be dismissed, maybe reported. Instead, the man waved her closer, his movements suddenly urgent. He began flipping through pages, comparing documents, pulling up files on his tablet. Amina stood silently, her hands trembling, feeling both foolish and relieved. Minutes stretched into an hour. The city outside grew darker, the lights sharper. Somewhere in that silence, the wrongness began to unravel. What Amina had noticed was a clause buried beneath layers of legal language, a trap disguised as a safeguard. It shifted liability in a way that would devastate the company once a certain threshold was crossed. The man, whose name was Daniel, had trusted his advisors, trusted the system he had built. In his rush to finalize a deal meant to save his company from a temporary downturn, he had missed the knife hidden in the paperwork. By the time he fully understood it, his hands were shaking. Daniel realized that if the deal went through, by morning his company would hemorrhage $500 million, its assets swallowed by partners who had planned this from the beginning. His reputation, his employees' livelihoods, and years of work would vanish. He canceled the approval, halted the process, and began making calls that would echo through boardrooms before dawn. The disaster was stopped, not by analysts or executives, but by a cleaning lady who trusted her instinct. Amina went home that night feeling strange and hollow, unsure if she had crossed a line she could not uncross. Days passed. She returned to her routine, scrubbing floors, emptying bins, her body aching in familiar ways. No one mentioned that night. She assumed it would fade into memory, another moment where she had dared to exist and been lucky enough to survive it. Then, one evening, she was called into an office she had never cleaned before. The space was warm, filled with sunlight and quiet. Daniel was there, no longer slumped, but still carrying a seriousness that spoke of responsibility rather than fear. He thanked her, not with empty words, but with an explanation of what she had done, what she had prevented. He told her how close everything had come to collapse, how $500 million had been hanging by a thread she had seen when no one else did. Amina listened, overwhelmed, her mind struggling to connect those numbers to her own life, where money was measured in groceries and rent. She tried to explain that she had only followed a feeling, that she had seen something familiar and could not stay silent. Daniel saw in her not just courage, but clarity, the kind that comes from living without a safety net. He offered her more than gratitude. He offered her a chance.